Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new week. Today, I'm going to be lecturing on the topic of social environments. And so, hopefully, you've already completed the OER text readings. I like to, but when I record these lectures, I like to provide like supplemental lecture material to help expound on certain elements in the text or concepts in the text. And just to give my personal commentary about those things. So I hope you're enjoying the lecture. I hope they're really helpful. Make sure to also please complete the module activities as well. There's a lot of good videos and a lot of good supplemental information that I've included. I've spent a lot of time trying to find these different resources to kind of enhance your learning experience in this online course. So, social environment. When we're thinking about the social environment, we're thinking about um, how do we prepare infants and toddlers, because we're all born social beings. I mean, that we all have different temperaments. We might consider ourselves introvert versus extrovert, but we all come to this world wanting to communicate and wanting to socialize with other people and make connections with others. And so this um, what you're going to read or what you have read about language development, that is that's centered around like your interactions and the relationships that you've developed as an infant with the adults and your fellow peers in the infant toddler classroom. But you also have to learn social skills. How do you make friends? How do you interact with other people? Um, at During the infancy stage, babies are more interested in, I mean, the younger they are, there is an awareness that there's other people, you know, who aren't them, right? But as they get older, there is this heightened sense of self-awareness that I'm different from this person. Um, and babies can tell the difference between young children versus adults, right? And so and as a child gets older, like in a toddlerhood, uh, they become more interested in other children, right? They're curious. And equipping young children, infants and toddlers with the ability to communicate and socialize and make connections early on will only benefit them when they get into the preschool classroom, which is the time when friendships become, or making friends become, more and more important, especially for their development of self-concept and developing a positive self-identity and self-image. So, what is socialization? And you've probably heard families talking about, oh, I need to put my child in a group care for socialization. Well, the socialization is the process of learning the standards and expectations of a specific in a specific cultural context. What is quote unquote socially appropriate, right? In terms of like how to interact and how to talk to people. Like there's um, uh, tone. It involves tone, body language. I know in the Italian culture, people speak with their hand, in addition to um, verbalization. And so in some cultures, they speak with body language, right, or facial expressions. Um, Socialization is learning social skills, um, which is part of a whole socialization process. And also, children need the care and support of trusted adults during the socialization process. So, how one socializes, for example, in Venezuela, might be different from someone from China. I know that I've had some friends from, let's see, where were they from? I think they were from a Latin American country. I think it might be from Nicaragua. But they're like, wow, people hug a lot, or people smile a lot here. Like why do they always smile? right? And that's an example of the American socialization standards, right? That other people from outside of the US notice, but for us, it's kind of like it's the norm for us, right? And so, and I also want to emphasize that socialization processes and norms are different from culture to way of being in a society, right? When it comes to socialization. So early social behaviors, what does it look like? Well, it all begins with attachment. Um, and early smiling is also a social behavior. Making eye contact is considered social behavior. Verbalizations, um, engaging in that back and forth exchange, being responsive to a baby's smile and to cry. I mean, that's all part of the whole socialization process. And within a few months, infants are effective at nonverbal communication and have attached themselves to specific people. So Erickson, if you recall, Erickson's psychosocial stages of human development, the first three stages are involved in early childhood. Trust versus mistrust. That in turn impacts how they experience the next stage, which is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Again, impact the third stage, which is taking initiative versus guilt. So trust is the first stage of the psychosocial stage of development. And if infants' needs are consistently and predictably met, they learn that the people and the environment are trustworthy. Okay. And that is basic. That's a basic level for survival. Um, Trust is also part of um, the foundation for being able to separate from their caregivers, um, and being able to explore, trusting their secondary caregivers in the classroom, trusting the environment, trusting that their needs will be met. That's very important in order to create a secure base for children to explore, and to socialize with other people and to be with others. When it comes to experiences or situations of separation between the infant or toddler and the adult, it's really critical for the infant toddler caregiver to be there to help with that separation process. When the child separates from the primary caregiver, it is your responsibility to be there to help the child in the saying goodbye, in that transition, and reassuring them and comforting them and reminding them that, hey, I you can rely on me while your other primary caregiver is at work or at home or what have you. Helping children through a very, and I don't want to say traumatic, but a very um, emotionally charged situations such as separation. They really need that co-regulating by the secondary primary caregiver. Being honest and stating facts, including emotional facts, offering support, welcoming things from home, and allowing children individual ways of feeling comforted. Right. So making your classroom a second home to the child will help with that process of transition. Sometimes adults have difficult time dealing with the children's separation issues. So it might really, I've seen parents cry outside the classroom. And not only are you comforting the child, but you also have to reassure the caregiver that their child is in good hands, that you will be there to help co-regulate and to spend quality time, and provide um, uh, care and meet the child's needs while they are gone. Um, Parents also need to know what's going to happen once they leave. So letting parents know, like, right after you leave, I'm gonna um, take so and so, and we're gonna have breakfast together, right? And if he really, really misses you, I will take out his picture, his family picture, and I'll make sure to comfort him. Parents have separation anxieties of their own, and separation involves a range of feelings. So This goes back to being compassionate for the infant and their family, and also having empathy. How do you deal with separation, right? Does it take you a little while to kind of adjust to a new environment, right? A lot of times, and I like to use this example, like if you were on an airplane by yourself and you didn't know anybody, and all of a sudden you and everybody on the plane feels really intense turbulence. The first thing you'd probably do is kind of like look at the person next to you for reassurance, right? That's an attachment behavior. Um, Attachment behaviors are triggered, and we normally we seek some type of familiarity in order to feel reassurance. So sometimes we'll look at in that case of airplane turbulence, we'll look at the person to try to share a common reaction. And that helps us to feel comforted, like, okay, I'm not the only one, right? That's a type of attachment behavior. Autonomy. So socialization and feeling trust in the caregiver and the environment promotes and facilitates autonomy or independence. Autonomy occurs when an infant has reached their second year of life, and when infants become toddlers, they begin to perceive themselves as more as individuals. Children begin to learn self-help skills during this stage. And children at this stage of development, according to Erik Erikson, okay, um, should feel comfortable to explore in their environment. They should want to do things on their own. They should want to socialize with other children. At 2 years of age, children should seek other playmates. They might not have a friend like a best friend or a regular friend, but they're interested in other children, and they're more self-aware that I am my own person and that person is their own person. What does autonomy look like? Well, you hear a lot of no's. My daughter Peyton will say, she used to, when she was 18 months, I do it by my own self with everything, feeding, putting her shoes on, putting her clothes on. And it didn't matter her clothes were on backwards, right? It didn't matter that her shoes were on the wrong feet. She insisted on being self-sufficient. And, I just kind of like stepped aside, and at that point with my third child, I'm like, whatever gets you out the door, little girl, do what you need to do. And that encouragement being autonomous helps children progress to the next stage of taking initiative, right? Rejecting behaviors are typical of toddlers when they protest. They show that's just a sign of developing independence. And by capitalizing on your child's drive for autonomy, you can promote the development of self-help skills. And I also want to emphasize that this is very a westernized, biased perspective. And other collectivist cultures, like the Asian culture, um, they view the adult as the main provider and caregiver, meaning they do a lot of things for the child, right? And in some regions, in China, for instance, the toddler is expected to do things all by themselves. I mean, you've probably seen videos of young 3-year-olds cooking their own meals over a fire, right? It's all culturally based, right? And um, it's nothing to look down on or to judge. It's just how their culture is. It's just one way of being. What I'm teaching you in this class is just one way of one philosophical approach to being with infants. So going back to autonomy, independence and toilet training, which is a part of a child's growth and autonomy, depends on control, right? Being able to, it also has to do with their ability, their fine motor ability to control their bladder, those bladder muscles. That takes practice. Um, Also, cognitive understanding, right? Children need to know that you can't really focus when you have a poopy diaper, right? If you have a poopy diaper and the poop leaks, to the vagina area, you can get an infection, right? So they at 2 to 3 years old, they have an increased understanding of the why when you give an explanation. And also emotional willingness. Are they emotionally ready, right? Are they ready for that? And then it leads to initiative, Erikson's third stage. Erikson's term, taking initiative, is when older toddlers create, invent, explore, and they're very, very, they kind of take the lead in their own investigation and in their own play. And caregivers should respond to initiative by providing information, resources, explanation, freedom of movement, and encouragement. Just like a teenager, the more you try to control a toddler, the more they'll protest, right? The more they'll rebel. Um, when it comes to guidance and discipline, there's a couple good videos that I posted in the module about guidance, and I don't like the word discipline. I like to think more in terms of like understanding and supporting behavior. So guidance is a part of the ongoing process of teaching social skills to children. Guidance is the philosophical approach to teaching the standards and expectations of the classroom culture, right? For example, we don't hit, hitting hurts, right? We use our words. You can tell Maricela, I don't like that. Or can I have it when you're done, right? And, discipline, I'm not a fan of that word just because I don't feel like children deserve to be punished or disciplined. I feel like they can learn by you giving explanation, so they have a better understanding of the why. And that's all part of the process of perspective taking is taking the time to explain, right? Behavioral management, I guess is a more neutral, softer term, means the specific techniques used to accomplish this task. So we can look at behavioral conditioning, B.F. Skinner, but what we find is punishment and rewards, they only work for the short term. This is why we don't use timeout, because it's exclusionary and it's not socially, emotionally beneficial to young children, right? It works in the short term, but children don't learn to come to understand the consequences of their action if you put them in timeout, right? You have to explain to them why it's not okay to take a toy that someone else is using. It's not okay to force someone to share when they're not done with a toy. It's not okay to bite someone when you're upset. It's okay to feel upset, but it's not okay to bite because biting hurts. You see the bite mark on Olivia's arm? Ouch, that hurt. Let's go get her some ice, right? One's guidance philosophy determines one's discipline technique. Okay. I tend to use an authoritative type of parenting style in the classroom. I remember there was a parent or primary caregiver, and I had never met. It was the beginning of the school year, and I remember he was trying to put me in my place, trying to establish who was boss. And I remember he came up to me and he said, "Well, I just want to let you know, Miss Janice, that I use police parenting." Which meant that he was explaining that he spanks his children, he's the boss, children should be seen and not heard. And I kind of just looked at him and I said, well, it's going to be interesting here because I don't use that parenting style. And so his approach was very different from my own. I'm a more authoritative. I like to talk things out. I like to give reasoning, explanations. And for me, that's been effective. And for me, I find that it helps the child um, engage in what Piaget called theory of mind, reading other people's minds, right? That's part of empathy development. And I feel like that's more effective in the classroom, right? Um, that just wasn't my philosophy. Security and control for infants. So guidance in the first year must be accepting and trust building. I mean, that's what you do for the first 6 months is really trying to gain the child's trust. Infants do not require discipline because their limits come naturally from their own limitation. You can never spoil an infant. Never. Ever, ever, ever. Cognitively, they're unable to be spoiled. They cannot manipulate you. Okay. Infants, they cry for a reason. They're crying because they're trying to communicate. That they're not trying to upset you. Um, Yeah. So just gotta make sure that you understand that infants, they their behaviors and their actions are just meant to kind of like let you know, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is what my needs are right now. When setting limits or boundaries with toddlers, toddlers need to know that there are limits. You have to set boundaries. The limits are rules of behavior. And limits do provide security. So think about, how do limits provide security? Think about that. You can pause the video for a second. Just like us as adults, we need boundaries in order to respect people's personal space, to enact some order, right? In for example, in how we operate in the workplace. So exactly like for infants and toddlers, there needs to be limits that are set in order to set expectations of behavior, right? And how to respect one another. Well, when it comes to biting, people aren't very comfortable when it comes to biting, but biting is very typical among, in toddlers. Emotions can be so overwhelming and overtake their ability to think clearly that the only way to get their message across is to bite someone because it gets an immediate reaction. And to address biting, we first have to know why the child is biting. And second, we also have to learn what is behind the behavior. So, why and what? Maybe they're tired. Maybe it's a learned behavior. Maybe they just didn't have the words to express that they wanted to play with that toy and they got really upset. And I don't have the words, so I'm just going to bite you to let you know that I want that toy. Right. And so the thing about biting is it is typical in toddlerhood, but you have to nip it in the bud. You have to put a stop to it quickly, right? You can say, if you see it happen, I mean, the best thing you can do is prevent it from happening in the first place by setting boundaries and teaching ways of communicating, verbalizing needs with others, setting boundaries and setting expectations. But sometimes, children, they just go for it because that's like, I don't have the words, I can't think of the words right now, so I'm gonna bite. And it happens. And the way that you react is really important, right? I've seen teachers shame and say, don't do that, or stop it, right? Or that's not okay. And they scold the child. And that the only thing it makes the child do is feel shame and start crying, but it doesn't really stop the behavior, right? Lots of children who bite, if it's not handled the right way, and when I say the right way, responsibly and immediately, and getting to the root of the issue, the biting almost always happens again with the same child. So you have to make sure that you put a stop to it by saying, biting hurts. Biting is not okay. And then you comfort the other child, right? And you say in a firm but loving voice, right? Um, and then you kind of talk about like, oh, this is not okay. This hurts. This really hurts Olivia. Look at her face. What were you trying to tell Olivia? Did you want to have a turn with the bike? Oh, you wanted a turn with the bike. You can say to Olivia, Olivia, I want a turn. Can you say that? And even if when they repeat it, it's not perfect, the goal is for them to repeat it so that they have the words. So you're feeding them the script, you're feeding them the language. And yes, it does take repetition over and over. I swear, like toddlerhood and preschool age, I feel like all I'm doing is repeating myself. But that's typical because their short-term memory is very limited. So you just got to keep reminding them and being extra observant, right? Things happen really fast in a toddler classroom. This is why you can never, supervision and observation never ends when you are a teacher in the classroom. You're always on, always, always on. Okay. Reasons for biting, like I said momentarily, expressions of anger, expressions of curiosity. Yeah, and I should point out that it doesn't always have to happen because they're angry. It could also just be because they're excited. Um, Biting may mean they're trying to gain attention, or they just want a negative attention. They know it gets people's attention, so they do it again. The best way to stop biting is, as I said earlier, to prevent it. When a child is biting or using other aggressive behaviors, try to redirect the urge to a positive expression of the underlying emotion. So anytime I saw a child who, and this was typically children with really feisty temperaments, not all the time, but children with feisty temperaments, and particularly who are very quick to react with a high activity level, and who don't adapt very well to during transitions or new situations, really needed me to with this particular child needed me to be like 3 steps ahead of him. And so if I knew, he was very particular about a table he sat at. He needed to sit in this particular chair. He needed to have he didn't like opening up his granola bar because he would get frustrated. So I had to make sure that I positioned myself so that I was in close proximity, that I explained to him, and I'm not saying that I catered to him to make sure that he was never upset. I just made sure that whatever if I knew that something was going to, um, if I knew something that was going to make him feel some type of way, um, like if he didn't get the chair that he usually sits in, I would have to say, I just want to let you know that I saved a spot next to you, but today Adam is going to sit in the chair, in this chair, and you're going to sit in this chair today, right? And I try to make sure that I gave him enough heads up as much as possible, in order to help to reduce or to prevent any type of explosive reaction, for lack of a better description, because they were very explosive. Um, I mean, yeah. So anyway, just and also this takes a lot of, you have to know the child really well. Getting to know the child through the lens of the families, and also developing your ideas about the child through your own experiences, never through a deficit lens, right? People are, they just have different ways of being, and as a teacher, as an adult, as a co-regulator, you have to be willing to you have to check yourself constantly, and you have to check in with yourself all the time. Um, Super observant, always scanning the room, making sure that the interactions that are happening are, there's nothing that's going to be triggering, right? And sometimes a class that you get, some children just don't get along, right? Not everyone's going to like you, not everyone's going to like me, right? There's always going to be something that just is that's going to turn someone off, right? Same with children. Dynamics matters. Energy and temperament matter. And so you have to keep that in mind when you are caring for a group of infants and toddlers. Negativism. If you want to stop negativism, avoid challenges. And I mean, prevention, right? Try stating limits in positive terms. So, what are some positive ways to tell a child to get off the table? So, if you could think about that for a second. I've heard teachers say, get off the table. No, we don't use that. We only eat on there, and I think tone also matters as well. You could say we only eat on the table, right? But I think it matters how you say it. Like, oh, We eat meals on our table. We put our feet on the ground. Thank you. Right? And you don't want to make it a big deal because sometimes children seek negative attention. When they find out that a certain behavior gets them attention, then they'll engage in it more, right? That's negative attention. Um, Sometimes also redirecting their attention, like, oh, looks like Timothy really wants to jump on something high. Let's go in the play structure outside, right? Um, General considerations related to guidance and boundary setting that should be considered. Plan your environment. Really utilize the environment as a third teacher. You want to create an environment of yes. Limit no's. Okay. Avoid trouble spots, meaning if you know that there is a beloved area or toy, make sure there's multiples of that toy. Make sure that the area in the classroom allows for more than three people to be at, right? Especially if it's a favorite area. Appreciate the uniqueness of each child. Natural consequences are sometimes the best teacher, right? Um, Avoid any discipline technique that inflicts pain. I mean, obviously that's abuse, right? Cultivate family caregiver partnerships. I swear that if you don't want a stressful year, build that relationship with the family early on and often. I'm telling you, it is a true and trusted strategy. Partner with the families. Have an open line of communication. Share your observations. Don't always share like negative things. You want to make sure that you share concerns in a constructive and through a objective observational manner. Um, so yeah. And then also model the behavior you want to teach, not only in front of children, but the adults, right? Pro-social behavior, it's something that we teach. It's something that we model, right? It should be modeled by the caregivers, and it helps children care about other children. And what you model really sets the tone for the classroom culture, right? It's what you expect. And pro-social behavior depends on cooperation, and cooperation can be taught through everyday caregiving tasks. The special need of all children. Self-esteem is a special need of all children. Self-esteem is the valuing of the self. It stems from secure and nurturing attachment relationships. And for toddlers, self-esteem is related to the successful completion of tasks or a sense of mastery. And so make sure you create opportunities for multiple opportunities for mastery in different tasks, right? Whether it's socializing or completing a puzzle, what have you. And adults who feel good about themselves tend to pass that good feeling on to children. All right, so that's the lecture for social skills and the social environment. As I said at the beginning of this lecture, make sure you complete the readings and the module activities.